Now, I'm sorry, we're now running at least a minute or two late. Let's see, what is the Google time? 2 minutes late.
Sorry.
All right, I'd like to introduce a candidate for,
United States Senate.
I'm just looking here. Okay. I don't have my glasses on. Not a New Hampshire representative, used to a former representative, but, he can tell us about his life story and why he's running for U.S. Senate. Kevin?
Great, Norm, thank you.
Okay.
You run a very efficient meeting, by the way.
Thank you.
Even though we're just a couple of minutes over.
Okay.
Yes.
Great to be back up here in Belknap County with all of you. It was a short drive up from Londonderry. Unfortunately for my campaign manager, it cost him about $80 in gas. Seb Rogemont, by the way, who is my campaign manager, some of you may know him. He was the state director for Trump back in 2020. So very happy to have him on as my campaign manager. As I mentioned to you, I come to you from Londonderry. It's where my parents escaped the People's Republic of Massachusetts and moved my brother and I to back in 1986. And it's where I primarily grew up. My wife is a native to the area. She was also born in Londonderry. And she's currently a school teacher in the school system there. We have 3 kids in the schools, 2 in high school, 1 in middle school. And my parents still live in town. Her parents still live in Londonderry. And in fact, we live in her childhood home. Her brother lives across the street. So I'd like to say, if you've ever seen the show Everyone Loves Raymond, it's kind of like that on steroids. But it's great. We love our family. And so, and up until recently, I was the town manager in Londonderry for the last 8.5 years. And I'm very proud of my track record during that time. We were the fastest growing community for economic development, both commercial and industrial. But we did that by rolling out the red carpet for businesses large and small, really streamlined the regulatory environment there, got rid of things like impact fees, which are just another tax on developers. And so we grew the town's tax base by $2.2 billion over that time. It was the largest, fastest growing period in the town's history. We gave $11 million back to the property taxpayers during that time in budget surpluses. So we didn't hold on to the money, we gave it back. And so when I left in February, I left the town with a historically low tax rate. In fact, I went back in the books for 40 years and I couldn't find one lower. So I'm very proud of my record there. And also during this time, I was the chairman of the Peace Development Authority. Was appointed to that role back in 2017, and again had great success with economic development in that area and expanding the trade port. And so up until recently, back in February, I resigned both of those positions to run for the U.S. Senate, which begs the question, why the heck would I do that? And for me, the answer is very simple. First off, I love our country, right? And I truly do believe sincerely that our country's best days are still ahead. I really do believe that, despite the mess and the hole we're in right now. Otherwise, why do it, right? And I want to bring our local values, our way of knowing how to get things done here, and common sense way of finding solutions. I want to bring those things to Washington, those values to Washington. So I've called myself a kitchen table conservative, and the reason I've done that is because I'm talking to people about the issues that they're talking about today over their kitchen table, things that people are very concerned about, whether it's the high inflationary cost of everything, right? We just saw we've got the highest rate of inflation in 40 years right now, which is killing small business owners, by the way, not to mention people going out and just buying groceries, anything at the hardware store. It's prices at the pump. It's our energy crisis we have going on. We were energy independent over a year ago. Today we're not. It's parental rights in education. And it's our issues at the southern border, our crisis at the southern border. And I recently traveled there a little over a month ago, was on the Arizona-Mexican border, got a full briefing from U.S. Border Patrol, and I'm proud to say my plan for border security has now been endorsed by the U.S. Border Patrol Council. I'm very proud of that. And so, in talking about these issues, that is in stark contrast to what we're seeing in Washington right now, with our representative, our senator, absent Senator Maggie Hassan, who I have called on the campaign trail Maggie hasn't, because Maggie hasn't been representing us here in the Granite State. She hasn't been. Maggie hasn't done anything about the out-of-control spending and the printing of money in Washington, which has led to a lot of this inflationary problems. Maggie hasn't done anything about the prices at the pump and trying to make us energy independent again by opening up production here at home. Maggie hasn't done anything about parental rights and education. She hasn't done anything about securing the border, although she's had an epiphany. She had an election year epiphany all of a sudden. She went down to the border recently. Suddenly there's a problem at the border. It's probably because she's looking at the polls. I'll tell you what Maggie has done. She's trying to upend our election integrity. And we saw that when she voted to blow up the filibuster, right? And try to federalize our elections right here at home, right? Get rid of things like voter ID and start implementing things like ballot harvesting. Get rid of the first in the nation primary. All of these different things. Even our own Secretary of State, a Democrat at the time, Bill Gardner, he was against this idea. And she did it anyway. Why? Because she listens to the party bosses, right? She votes with Chuck Schumer 98% of the time, votes with Bernie Sanders 96% of the time. So we are not getting any representation for Maggie Hassan. And because of that, I truly believe that New Hampshire and the country are ready for a new generation of conservative leaders to take the fight to Washington and get results while they're down there. Now, I am not a Johnny-come-lately to the conservative movement. As Norm mentioned, I was elected to the legislature 25 years ago. I was 19 at the time. I have a voting record. You can analyze it 6 ways to Sunday. I was just as conservative then as I am today. I was a founding member of the HRA, the House Republican Alliance, and I was voted as the pro-life legislator of the year in 1997. I'm very proud of my pro-life record. I worked for former U.S. Senator Bob Smith, no relation, by the way, this is Smith 2.0. Worked for former Governor Craig Benson as well. Ran a group called Cornerstone about a decade ago. Helped fundraise over $1 million into that group, and along with a lot of the other Tea Party groups at the time, helped flip the House and the Senate here in New Hampshire and get super majorities in both of those chambers back in 2010. And of course, I have a record of results. My record in Londonderry and over at Portsmouth at Pease speak for themselves. You know, throughout my entire career in public service, I've always tried to be a servant leader. Because I believe that being a public servant comes with a high public trust. You need to be accountable to the people. And I always reminded my employees of that, 200 employees in the town of Londonderry, 6 unions. I always told them, don't forget who you work for. You work for the people, right? They don't work for you. And you're there to do their business. And leadership starts at the top, and I'd certainly do that as a United States Senator. You know, being a U.S. Senator, it's a dual function. Most people think of it as a person that goes to Washington, sits in the committee hearings, takes the votes, very important. But there's another whole part of it, which is your constituent service at home. And frankly, you ought to be home more often than you're in Washington. I won't be moving to Washington. My home is here in New Hampshire. But constituent service is a big piece of it. When I worked in the U.S. Senate for Bob Smith, started out as a caseworker, worked on immigration issues, Social Security issues, veterans issues, wider range of topics there, right? You're only as good as your staff. But again, that leadership starts at the top. So I invite you to join my campaign. We've raised over $400,000 in just 9 weeks. That was our first quarter reporting. Very, very thankful to the amount of people that have invested in my campaign. And so we're hitting the ground running. So over the coming months, hope to earn your trust, hope to earn your respect, certainly hope to earn your vote in September, and definitely in November, because we got to win this seat back. We have to win the seat back. It's imperative. So with that, happy to open the floor to questions.
I was wondering if you were aware that America is the #1 country for child trafficking, and what do you think about that?
Well, what I think about is a lot of it's going on at the border, right?
Yes.
A lot of it's happening at the southern border. So when I was down in Arizona at the border and talking to U.S. Border Patrol, here's basically what they told me. There's a simple fix to this in securing our border. And by the way, it was mostly secure, again, in the last year of the Trump administration. 2 quick fixes. Number one, you don't need to throw more money at this problem. Money isn't the problem, right? And you're gonna hear Senator Hassan say that. She's gonna say this is all about more resources more drones, more technology, money, money, money. Now, the first thing is you have to change the policy from catch and release, which is what it currently is, back to the remain in Mexico policy. So the deal was, when the Trump administration was in control, they said any illegal immigrant that comes over the border and you're caught, you're fingerprinted, you're then sent back to Mexico and you have to stay there awaiting your, your hearing, right? We don't do that anymore. And by the way, when we did that as a country, it dramatically reduced the amount of illegal crossings that we had and the amount of apprehensions that we were doing. Where I was in a place called Bisbee, Arizona, right on the border, and went from 100,000 illegal crossings in a year down to 10,000. And why was that? There was no incentive anymore for them to come over. The whole idea is, come over and stay here, right? That's what they want to do. When they were told you have to go back to Mexico, guess what? Completely disincentivized them to come over. So you have to go back to doing that policy. That's number one. Number two, you do have to finish the border wall in certain areas along the border. It doesn't have to be along the entire southern border, but in those areas where there are gaps and there aren't as many border patrol agents. It acts as a deterrent, gives them more time to deploy out there if in fact someone's trying to, come over the wall. So you do those two simple things, you're gonna dramatically reduce the number of illegal border crossings we have, which is a huge cause of the child trafficking.
Not all of it, though.
Not all of it, but it's a big cause of it, okay? Same thing with the drugs too, right? By the way, the cartels are controlling all of the border crossings from Mexico into the United States. Do you know how many countries they documented last year that people were from, these are just folks they apprehended. Do you know how many different countries they documented that they were from? 151. 151. Why is that? Because the cartels, they market this. This is a business for them. They market this around the globe. We'll help you get into the United States of America. Because for them, the big thing is running the drugs over. That's where all the money is. But guess what? You still have to pay them a fee to come over anyway, whether you're smuggling drugs in or not. So the cartels are just getting richer and richer off this whole scheme. It's an abomination. It's a national security crisis. Why it's turned into a partisan issue, it's beyond me. But it has to be solved immediately, because it is a national security crisis for us.
Excuse me, is it really beyond you that you don't understand why it's a partisan?
No, I get why.
I was with you until that moment.
No, I understand why the Democrats are advocating for this. There's no, I do understand that.
Well,
But I'm saying it's beyond me how they've turned it into a partisan issue, is what I'm saying. It shouldn't be.
Can I ask you, we know that, we know that you, and we don't have a particular fondness for Senator Hazen. But you will have to win a Republican primary. What do you say distinguishes you from your other two main opponents at this point, General Bolduc and Senator Morse?
Sure.
How do you distinguish yourself on those two, such that when a Republican primary voter goes in to vote, that voter should vote for you?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And let me start by saying this. I have a tremendous amount of respect for both of those folks.
Sure.
I have a tremendous respect for General Bolduc and his service to our country, and the same thing for Chuck Morse, who has served the state and the Senate for a long time. And by the way, past this prologue, right? I ran for governor 10 years ago. I like to say I successfully lost the Republican primary that year. But I immediately endorsed my opponent at the time, was Ola Montag. And if either of those two gentlemen win the primary, I'm happy to support whoever the nominee is. I think it'll be me this year, but I'm happy to. So I want to say that up front. As far as distinguishing, number one, we each bring different backgrounds into this, right? So as I said, people want a new generation of conservative leadership. The strengths I feel I bring is, folks, for those of you who want to make sure that you're going to elect someone who, when they go to Washington, actually votes the way that they're talking about in the campaign, you can trust me on that. As I said, past this prologue, you can look at my past record. You can look at what I've done in the past for the conservative grassroots movement, okay? Number two, you need a coalition to win. You need a coalition to win the general election. Republican primary, yes, those are your base voters. But in the general election, you're gonna need Republican voters, you're gonna need independents and conservative Democrats, okay? believe that in my work that I've done in the last decade in showing that I can actually get results, conservative results, by the way, too, but do it amongst a wide range of people. It's why I've been able to raise a lot of money. I feel that's gonna be a very strong point for me going up in a general election against Senator Hassan.
So you believe you have a broader appeal
I do.
at this point than the other two
I do.
candidates?
Yeah, I
Okay,
do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Norm?
I would be remiss if I didn't ask some questions about the Second Amendment and your positions on gun rights. As you know, New Hampshire has been a bastion of freedom for, in a lot of areas, particularly in gun rights. We have constitutional carry, which was passed in 2017. If you're elected to the US Senate, what federal gun laws would you seek to repeal, if any?
Well, I'll tell you what, I would be in favor of reciprocity, nationwide reciprocity laws for, for open carry. So
Concealed
that's-
carry.
Yeah, for concealed carry, excuse me. And so, that certainly I'd be in favor of. I would not be in favor of any new restrictions, okay, on gun rights. As far as which ones would I be in favor of repealing, I'd want to explore it more, Norm, but, I'm certainly happy to take a look at it. Again, I'm an advocate for the Second Amendment rights. I have a voting record that shows that. And, as I said, I certainly wouldn't be in favor of any new, restrictions.
Just as a little follow-up, do you favor gun-free zones around schools and places like that?
I don't think they're necessary. I think they're feel-good legislation or feel-good rules, but I don't feel they're necessary.
Mark?
Deficits are something that leads to debt.
Yeah.
Debt has some ramifications. Can you explain to me why debt and deficits are either a good thing or a bad thing?
They're a bad thing, and I'm glad you brought that up. First of all, again, when you're printing money over and over, that's what we've got, part of what's going on with our inflationary problem right now. You can't print as much money as we did, especially through this pandemic, and it was already a problem before the pandemic, but now it's been exacerbated with the amount of money that's been printed. Eventually, the dollar starts to lose its worth, starts to lose its value, okay? On top of that, who's our number one foreign debt holder? China. And make no doubt about it, our biggest foreign threat right now is the Chinese Communist Party. They have stolen so many of our secrets, so many of our IP, okay? And there's stuff that we probably, well, in this room, we may not even know about, but certainly the federal government knows about, how they've just infiltrated so many areas in our country right now, okay? This is a big, big problem, and what have we done about it? Nothing. Again, the Trump administration was the first administration to finally push back on China, all right? But we haven't been doing it since then. So, number one, that's a problem in and of itself, that they're the largest foreign holder of our debt. But number two, yeah, eventually it leads to a calamity. I was seeing something recently that said our debt right now is greater than, or it's greater than our GDP output. You can't have that. You simply can't have that. You would never run your own household budgets that way. You wouldn't run the state. I certainly didn't run my budget that way in Londonderry. But somehow the federal government thinks you can just keep printing money, printing money, printing money. And by the way, this is the Democrats' way of trying to hook people in and get more votes. Free money, free money. Free college. You know, we're gonna cancel there's no canceling student loans. All it is a transfer of the person who borrowed it to all of us. We're now gonna be paying for it. That's all it is. I mean, that's crazy. Absolute absurdity. They talk about giving free gas cards out. Gas got too high. By the way, it's Putin's fault. You know that, right?
Right.
It's all Putin's fault. But and so their response was, well, let's give people gas cards. Enough is enough. Look, I'm not doing this for my health. So if I'm elected, I'm not going down there just to fit in to the swamp. In fact, I've already said 2 terms. That's it. I've signed the term limit pledge. We have people in Washington that have been down there for far too long, on the Republican side, on the Democrat side. And they should be term limited. But even if we don't have a constitutional amendment for term limits, that's all you get me for is 12 years. Because I believe in turnover,
I believe in sending new people down. I believe in new ideas, new energy, and not becoming part of what Washington is. And that's a big part of the problem, is they've become so insulated down there, and they've become so just, they don't, it's like they don't even know what they're doing anymore, in terms of, well, desensitized to the fact that they're just spending, spending, and spending, they think it won't cause any problems. And we're feeling it, we're feeling the problems right now with it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my congressman is a kid of Jack Kemp. He said 50 years ago that an important demographic in this country is the black voter, that historically, since that 50 years, has always voted Democrat. We're seeing a little bit of shift in their vote, but at this point, I'd like to see I would like to know what you would say to black voters and why they should vote for you.
I would say it to any voter. See, I think part of the problem is the Democratic Party, they love to divide. They love to divide people by race, by class, by sex, whatever. We need a message for everyone, whether they're black, white, red, Hispanic, Latino, whatever, right? And so my message would be, our party and our message is the party of prosperity. And by the way, if you've been voting Democrat over and over and over and not getting any different results, which of course is the definition of insanity, stop doing it, right? Vote for new leadership. That would be my message. But again, that's a message for everyone. You know, everyone should have an equal opportunity to live the American dream. And that's another thing the Democrats have done. You notice they don't talk about equality anymore. What do they talk about? Equity. Equity, right? So it's not everyone has an equal playing field to work hard, be successful, and live the American dream. Now it's, oh, well, you don't have what they have, so we'll take some from you and give it to you, regardless of what you've done, right? That's not America. That is not America. We gotta change that, but it's getting our message out and articulating that message, right? And calling them out for when they divide people along those lines, because they love to do it. Yes, sir.
You said you had you were working with Bees Air Base.
I was the chairman of the Peace Development Authority.
Okay. While you were there, and you know, I don't know how much you were privy to. Would you happen to be privy to the people that are flying in from border? Do you know anything about what's going on?
Well, I do know I know all about that. We wrote an op-ed piece about it. I asked the airport director, Paul Green, before I left. I said, Paul, are any of these going on in Peace? Paul was not aware of any. Okay, that's the airport director there. Now, so if they were doing it, then it's unbeknownst to Paul. But that was my go-to person because he was the airport director, and that's who I asked. But yeah, I'm very well aware of what they're doing. You know, again, this is just another common sense would tell you. You can't have so many illegals coming into the country. And this is the thing, by the way, whenever we talk about this stuff, they're like, oh, you guys, this is the party of anti-immigration, here they go, the xenophobes, they're at it again. No. We're the party of common sense. And common sense, we're not anti-immigration. Come in the legal way. And by the way, if we have to make it legally, we have to look at making the system easier to get visas or whatever, because by the way, we do have a labor shortage. Well, then let's look at doing that. But come in illegal. We are a nation of laws. And either we enforce the laws or we don't enforce the laws, right? Yes.
Kevin, you said earlier that you thought you had a broader appeal that would set you aside from Morrison Bolduc. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of Republican candidates for a variety of offices manage broader appeal by governing to the center and even to the left. We're seeing that with our current governor right now. How do you, as a Republican Senate candidate, manage a broader appeal without abandoning the core conservative principles that are the bedrock of the Republican Party?
I think number one, people respect it when you hold firm to your principles, whether they agree with you or not. They respect when you hold to an opinion, which by the way is why Senator Hassan's getting raked through the coals right now by your own party, by going to the border wall and suddenly becoming an advocate for the wall and increased security, right? Because they said you're pandering, you're a sellout. Okay, that's her own activists in her party saying that. So that's number one, is you can't sell out on your ideals. When I say broader appeal, that doesn't mean selling out or being squished on certain issues. But what I mean by that is number one, you have to articulate the message in a way that people know, okay, this is a practical idea. This makes a lot of sense. And you have to talk to, you can't just say, I'm going to, not campaign, for instance, in certain areas of the state, because we know those are Democratic strongholds. Look at, there are people, I think we have, as conservatives, have a lot of common sense ideas and a lot of common sense solutions to a lot of these things, and we call them conservative, right? And it's articulating that message to those folks who maybe aren't as active in politics and maybe have been given a bad picture of what conservatives are, and going out and meeting with them and talking to them, making them realize, oh no, these are things that can get done. Look, I managed a town in a nonpartisan position, as a town manager was, for 8.5 years. I had to work with people all across the aisle. I had department heads who were, Democrats, right? 6 unions, all right? Had to negotiate dozens of contracts during that time in conservative ways, right? Because they had to be acceptable to the voters when you're negotiating these things. And so I feel I've got an ability to hold true to my conservative values, my conservative principles. People know where I'm coming from, but do it in a way that isn't pushing people away, it's not offending people, but instead invites them in and say, you know what, this can work. This absolutely can work. Impact fees, I mentioned impact fees. I don't know how many of you know what impact fees are, right? But these are monies that are typically charged to developers on any kind of development. And I noticed that as a town, we were collecting these fees, but then we were holding on to them. We weren't using these impact fees. And then the state law is after 5 or 6 years, you give them back. You give the fees back. Well, I said, well, this is crazy. We're just building up a largesse of money, not using it, and then giving it back after 5 years. If we're not gonna use it, we shouldn't be charging these things in the first place. Again, it's a tax. It's a tax on business, a tax on developers. So we got rid of it, That was a conservative solution right there, right? But told in a way that it made sense to people. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about the broader vision. Skip.
Okay, a double-pronged amplification of what Dave just asked you. If you are selected and win in the general election, would you be joining, number one, the Freedom Caucus, as far as being able to show us that you are going to be the conservative that you are telling us now? And two, would you be willing to make a promise that any legislation that passes by your signature or your vote that violates any precept or black and white letter part of the New Hampshire Constitution, you will vote no?
Look, if there's a piece of federal legislation that is in violation of the New Hampshire Constitution, I won't be in favor of it. I'm here to represent the people of here in New Hampshire. So I'm certainly not going to be in favor of legislation that violates the New Hampshire Constitution.
So you will be voting no?
I would vote no.
Thank you.
Absolutely. As far as the Freedom Caucus, I'll look at it, Skip. To be honest, right now, my goal is to try to win the election, right? And then after the election's over, I'll look at what caucuses I want to join. But you know what? I'm going to be my own senator down there. Again, I'm here for the people of New Hampshire. And I don't have a problem with all the various caucuses, but sometimes you get into these caucuses and then you're always beholden. You got to vote this way, you got to vote this way. Not that the Freedom Caucus is a bad caucus, they're not. But at the same time, I want to be representative as best I can to the people of New Hampshire and what the people of New Hampshire expect. So I'm not saying I wouldn't join the caucus, but I want to explore more.
Mitch McConnell, would you vote for him as leader?
I'll tell you this, I'm making no commitments prior to this. I don't know who's going to run for majority leader. The last time around, there was only one person that ran, and that was Mitch, right? Here's what I will say, I hope there's options, right? I hope there's options, and I'm going to look at all those options.
Kevin, thank you very much. That was the last question. If you're going to be available, stick around. Maybe some other people want to corner you with some one-on-one or whatever.
Sure, I'll be sticking around.
And I'm sure you must have brought contribution envelopes.
Look, if you want to make a donation, it's very easy. KevinSmithForSenate.com. That's all you have to do.
All right. Let's want to go back to Representative Terry wanted to.
Crook TV.